Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Money with Alpha. I'm Alpha, and in case you haven't listened for a while or you haven't listened before, my name is Alpha Schulte. I was listening to a podcast recently where they said, oh, people don't introduce themselves often enough. So I thought I will do that briefly, and then we'll get stuck into today's episode. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is I've been saying sort of similar things to clients and people lately, and I thought, you know what, I think this might be a thing I need to talk about. And that is giving your money a purpose. And because I'm in Australia and we have dollars, so I was like, give every dollar a purpose. But the same principle applies if you're earning euros or pounds or yen or whatever it happens to be. But it's giving every element or every single thing of a currency that you earn a purpose. Otherwise, it just kind of dissipates. And if you think about our lives, like I spent probably most of my 20s trying to find my purpose. I did so many things. I read so many things. I went to so many seminars. I went to the US. I did lots. And I've since stopped that search because it's one of those sort of searches I think that never really ends. But when it comes to money and even our lives, to have a purposeful life means something different to everyone. It's a little bit like happiness. And money is quite unique as well in that it has to have a purpose as such, but that purpose is still very individual to you and what that actually means for you. So it's essentially about a few different steps, which I will talk a bit more about, but it's being intentional, being clear, being focused, being consistent, and staying disciplined. So they're essentially the five elements about giving your money a purpose. I'll tell you a little story from my own personal experience about this. When we were saving for a car, and I quite often start with the end in mind. So I was like, okay, well, about how much do we want to spend on the car? Or, there's another example I'll give in a moment, but and then how much time do we think the car's going to last? Because in my particular case, this was about, a car that we had that was old that was going to die. Um, rather than going, or you could even say in however many years you would like to upgrade your car. So you give yourself an amount. And of course, future gazing is a little bit difficult because we don't know what's going to happen in the market, but a rough amount, calculate your steps backwards and go, okay, well, I now know I need to save about $500 a month for the next 3 years in order to get to the value of the car that I want. Then you can deal with things as they change and evolve over time, but you set yourself something to start with now, but with some end in mind. And same with like when I had my daughter and I had this idea in my head of like I wanted to have a certain amount for her by the time she turned 21. And so I figured out what that end amount was. We had some pooled funds from family members that we kind of put together. So that was like the starting point. So what was the gap between where we sort of were at and where I wanted to be, and how much would I have to put away every month or quarter? In our case, I do it quarterly in order to get to that amount. Now, that's not assuming there's sort of rates of return in there as well because I've invested it. And there's elements that you can't control, but what you can control is where you start and the idea of where you're headed. And it's made that so much easier. When my husband and I were paying off our home, that money didn't even come into the equation. That had a purpose, and that purpose was not paying off the home. That we managed to do like separately. And anything else that comes in, that money is there for her. That's it. That doesn't go towards anything else. That's that money has that purpose, and that's where it's staying. And it makes it so much easier then. So every quarter we contribute to that. And then when we were saving the car every month, we'd contribute to that account. And that account was strictly for that, for the car. It wasn't for anything else. I had money set aside if any other emergencies happened and we needed money for something. That came out of that. So it makes it so much easier when you're clear and very intentional about what that is. So you start with the sort of the intention kind of starts first because sometimes we're not always clear on what we want. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps I see with a lot of people that I work with is they're not necessarily clear on where they're headed, what they want, how much do I need in retirement, what do I need to do now? Like there's just so many questions that you think you can't possibly answer them all, so you don't even start to answer one. And quite often getting the answer to one then frees up your mind to go, okay, well, now that I've got the answer to that, I have a bit more clarity, a bit more information to work with. And so now I'm going to try and look at that. And it's literally, it becomes this like tic tac kind of, I see it in my mind as like this winding journey. And that's very much, that's life, really. When I think back to the doe-eyed 21 or so year old I was when I graduated university and started working in accounting, and the person I am now, so different. I could not even have foretold or imagined what I would be doing now at that point. So you still have to be quite fluid, but so that starts with the intention, and then there is some clarity. When you start to become intentional, your mind will start to focus. And this is the great thing about our minds. We have what they call an NLP, the reticular activation system. And as soon as we start to hone a little bit in on something, our minds will suddenly see it everywhere. We'll hear a book, somebody will recommend something, or we'll listen to a podcast that'll suddenly randomly come up, or something will appear on your phones because they're listening too. A video will appear on YouTube. And that is just, it's incredible how that kind of thing really happens. And the information and might be standing next to somebody in a line, start talking to them, and they might have a piece of an answer to a question that you have that you're not overly sure of yet. And then boom, that just unlocks so many things. So it's always amazing. I remember a story my mom tells. She was walking through a shopping center and there was a bookstore, and they had one of those like bargain bins out the front. And she was just sort of like ambling, and she was like, oh, I love books. I'll go have a look. And a book that really stood out to her was a book about Taoism. And that set her off on a spiritual journey and a path that helped her deal with a lot of the trauma that she'd experienced as a child, having been born towards the end of World War II in Vienna, and then fleeing to Paris. Like there's so much trauma in there that was never really dealt with because it wasn't even a thing back then to even recognize A, that it was trauma, and B, that you actually just do something about sort of working through it. It then kind of got passed into the generations a little bit. So I got some of that from my grandmother's trauma and my mom, because my grandmother was born in 1920 in Vienna. So there was a very tumultuous time and place in history. And so of course some of that came down the line. So we all have to then do it. But that book started it all for her. And that was just one little thing. So we underestimate the power of the little things in our lives, and just even the power of an intention can create an opportunity that opens up our minds to hear something that we may have heard before, but it didn't impact us in the same way. And then that clarity that you start to get a little bit about even wanting to ask questions. Like I've had a few clients recently who are in their 50s, and the questions that they're asking are really good questions. They have no idea how to answer them. And the fact that our society doesn't even help people answer this, or you've got to go to a financial planner and spend thousands of dollars to try and get this answered, when there's just a few simple steps that you can do to get started to get you on the path, so that down the track you might need to have a little bit more of a planning advice. So it's that clarity, and then being focused and intentional about that clarity in order to take the steps. Do you need to add extra into super? Do you also need to work on paying down your debt so that you are debt free by the time you retire? Can you also invest on the side as well? Or like how can you manipulate your money so that it stretches a little bit further so that you can do more things in parallel? Because the more things that you do and they're in parallel, the faster you will grow wealth. And this is a bit of a misnomer. Like I got the message growing up that you did one thing, you saved for a house. You could also get an investment property, but what the main message was you're paying off debt. Negative gearing was a thing, because it still is. Because quite often the rental repayments that you get on an investment property aren't going to pay all the expenses that you have. So you've got to dig into your other income in order to pay that. And yes, you could get a tax deduction, but it's all this like concept of losing money on an asset, and it all sounds really complex. But the main message out of it was debt. Get ready for, and then get into, and then start paying off debt. That's like the focus of ours in our 20s and 30s, and possibly even into our 40s. But as we start to get into our mid 40s, you're like, oh, it can't just be about this. Like, I'm never going to get a comfortable retirement if all I'm doing is focused on paying off debt. Yes, I have some superannuation sitting there, but if I'm a business owner, I've probably not been prioritizing that. I've probably been reinvesting in my business. So what do I then do? Oh my gosh, now I need to really start looking at it. So they're generally what I find triggers us to then go, I need to do something. What do I do? Who do I ask? Where do I start? Questions. Oh my goodness. And then overwhelm kicks in. And then we start to procrastinate. And that's again where that intentional and clarity, if we're clear, procrastination, we can just like step over it, and we can keep moving, and we can actually take the action. So then after being focused and then you start to take the action, you have to be consistent. So it's not about going, oh, I've created this amazing budget and now I can save all this money or I can invest all this money or I can add this to my super. And then you start to feel that you're being restricted too much. It's a little bit like going on a diet and having like no fun or no food that you actually really like in there. And so little by little you create bits in and you're like, oh, and then I might as well just give up now. And it just all goes backwards. If you've made any progress in the first place. I've done that dance many times. And even with the money side, it happens. It's very easy. And this is why I harp on about giving your money a purpose. Because back to my example of the car, for my daughter is different because she's only 9. So she hasn't got to the 21 years old yet. So that purpose is still very clear and very intentional and very focused and very disciplined with that. The car, we then had to buy a secondhand, another second. I hesitate to call it new because it wasn't new, but it was new for us car. And that money I'd been putting aside to pay for that suddenly just started to get spent. I was like, it took me a few months to actually realize what was happening. And I thought, oh my gosh, I teach this stuff and now I'm doing it. So that's why I get so passionate about making sure your money has a purpose because it's like this money now didn't have a purpose anymore. Its purpose had been fulfilled. So now it was just sort of squandering. And it's amazing how easy it is to do that. So now I've had to reassign it to give it a purpose again. And now that's a lot easier to stick with because I was like, yep. And then I have money, like for instance, I have fun fund. And this year there's a few fun things. Like I've gone to New Caledonia with my mum and my daughter earlier this year to help celebrate my mum's 80th. And then we're about to go skiing very soon. Depends when you're listening to this. We may have already been. And then we've got a couple of other little like micro breaks as well. And then something closer to Christmas time that's linked in with the business as well. And then next year we want to go back to Europe and see family. So it's all these things. And I was like, okay, so my fun fund is well and truly have a purpose. I may actually need to up it to cover all of these things that I want to do with it. But it makes it then easier because then again, I've also got all these things that I want planned. And then I have a rough idea in my head about how much I need to cover all those things. So then I can increase or decrease, in this particular case, more like increase the amount that I put away every month. And that amount may fluctuate a bit because income as a business owner does fluctuate, but at least percentages allow me to then make sure that it's going in the right place and then it's not being squandered. And that's not to say that I don't, make random purchases for things or we do things like, for instance, this week we're going to see, they call it's a secret concert, although it's not very secret, but you sit in a church listening to classical music being played. In this particular case, it's Pink music with candles all around you. And I've always wanted to do this. And I know my daughter and my husband both love Pink. And we didn't actually get to see her when she was in Brisbane for a concert because we just didn't manage, like there were no tickets. And so I thought, oh, this will be a nice kind of, very, very distant, runner-up prize for it, but it'll still be a really nice experience. So I thought, you know what? That's what I have this fun fund for. So we are going to go see that. And it makes it a lot easier to be comfortable, to be able to book things and not feel guilty. And have experiences. And that's not to say that everything has to cost. We like to go for bushwalks, and that's free. You obviously pay for some petrol to get to where you're going, but we usually bring a packed lunch. We have a walk, we sit, we have a picnic, and it's just a beautiful outing as well. So again, understanding what it is that you want, having clarity and being intentional is really, really important. So I'll go through those steps again. So start with your intention. What do you actually intend to have in your life? Like how do you intend your life to be and to go? Then start to get clear about what that really looks like. So I do have a lifestyle visioning exercise meditation that I offer as well. But you can still do this yourself. You can start to just sit and even just a general kind of, doesn't have to be full on meditation, but just sit there in quiet. Or if you like nature, sit there and just enjoy the sounds and let things percolate. So start to get a bit clear about what it is that you want. And in this particular case, you have to somewhat quantify that because you need to have an amount that it will go with because your money then again needs that purpose. And then start to really focus in on it. Have a vision board where things like that are included. I had done vision boards in the past, and this year I was reading a book called Manifest, I think. Yes, Manifest, and I can't quite pronounce the lady's name. I'm just trying to find the book on my bookshelf, and it was brilliant. It's like vision board. I was like, okay, all right, I'll do this again now. I'll do my vision board, and it's made such a difference. Like I've been on a retreat because I had retreat on there. I've done speaking because I've had speaking on there. And this we're only halfway through the year really. So I've still got more things on there that I want to do. Some things probably won't happen and that's okay. Maybe they will further in the future, but if I didn't at least have it there, I wouldn't even be aiming for it. So it's really important to have that clarity and that vision because it helps you be able to have some direction and then plan where your money absolutely needs to go in order to help you achieve that direction. Otherwise, it's just like boom, 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 random. And it's, just it's very difficult to plan it. And then consistency. So I was literally just doing a bit of an exercise to sort of demonstrate the power of consistency in terms of like compounding interest and paying down debt and even just being able to pay it fortnightly rather than monthly on a $500,000 loan can cut like 3 years off the loan and about $62,000. So that consistency really helps you save money. And then when you're investing as well, being able to invest money on a consistent, regular basis. And yes, the markets will go up and down, but if you just keep doing it, just keep adding, keep adding, keep adding, have that discipline and that consistency to keep doing it, you will end up with so much more money than in the future that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't done anything now. And the present is all we have. So you do something in the present. I had started micro investing about 7 years ago, and now I have just over $7,500 in that micro investing account. And that was cents on the dollar. And now I just add $10 a month. That's it. Like it doesn't have to be big steps. We think everything has to be hugely impactful and we have to go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Well, that doesn't always work for starters, and it's not always necessary. And yes, different times, different markets. Like I've seen my father lose money on property, and he's paid so much in interest over the years as well. Like, oh my goodness. Sometimes if you did the numbers, I actually ran the numbers on one of the properties and my grandmother had, and even being fully paid off and having tenants, it was only going to make about 4%. And the effort level to earn that 4%, I was like, you know what? It's easier to just sell the property and put that money into shares because I'm going to get more return easier for that. So it's that, opportunity cost kind of analysis and also doing what feels right for you. Just because someone says to you, so I had someone recently come to me and say, oh, my husband's about to, he wants to retire soon. He's like, he feels like we've missed the boat. We need to get an investment property. I was like, well, at this time of life, is that really the best thing? And she's like, I don't want that kind of pressure. Like, well, again, you've got to do what actually feels right for you and not go into such financial stress. I've seen financial stress. I've experienced financial stress. I've seen what it's like when you have a bill coming, you're like, I don't have the money to pay that. So you have to start paying interest on it. And it's, I was like, oh, so it's not a pleasant way to be. So, but understanding that your money has value, you have value, and you have the ability to manage it. Give your money a purpose. And then it kind of takes the focus a little bit off you and puts it actually on the money. And trust me, it actually makes it a bit easier because if you're saving money for your child or children or for a holiday or for whatever, it actually makes it easier to put your money in a certain place than it is if you consciously are or constantly are thinking, I've got to manage it. The pressure's on me. I was like, okay, well, let's make the money work. Where do I want it to go? That's what I need to focus on. So I hope that's helped a little bit. I'm on a mission to help everyone make all of their money matter, give it a purpose. So you'll probably start hearing about this concept a little bit more. And I'm going to start I actually wanted to do a challenge on this as well. So I'll probably be doing a 3-day challenge in the next month or so once I get myself back from holidays and organized. And if you'd like to be part of it, then you can certainly join. Once I have it all ready to go, I'll tell you a bit more about how to join. But I hope that's sort of given you a little bit more motivation, inspiration to actually start to do something with your money that's a little bit different from perhaps what you've done that will help get you where you want to go. Okay, have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you again next week.